What's going on, boys? It is day number 5. We are on part 2 of reading through the book of Matthew. Today, we are going to be covering the last 5 topics in chapter 5 of this series. We went through the first half yesterday, talking through the first half, talking about the Beatitudes, salt and light, the fulfillment of the law, and murder. So today, we're going to look at the last 5 main topics that are covered by our Lord Jesus, which are adultery, divorce, oaths, eye for an eye, and love for enemies. So all of these, by just first glance, before I even highlighted and wrote anything down, I immediately just kind of, paused and looked at these. And what's interesting is that each of these sections is only maybe 2 or 3 verses long, but yet can have a significant meaning that you could talk about for hours on end with someone. And while, I'm not going to spend too long talking about these, I really do think that these can be broken down even more. So if you really feel that these things are speaking to you, I would highly encourage you to just, pick one of these sections that you feel is calling to you, that you're struggling with, and break it down, maybe with someone that, you are really comfortable, that you can trust, and you can really talk about it. And so I think one of the great things to start off with is to talk about adultery. I think adultery is something that a lot of people deal with, especially for the guys out there. I think this is something that we don't really realize until we read this section. And so I'm going to read verses 28 through 30. This is what our Lord says here. He says, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gorge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." Now, I just want to clarify here that just because Jesus says to gouge out your eye and cut off your hand, this does not mean that you have to sit there and take, you have to physically gouge it. That's not what he's saying. That is not what he's saying, because, it took me a little while to understand that. What he's saying is that, adultery isn't just physical. He talks about that if you look at a woman lustfully, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything, but that thought process you have in your mind, that is what people don't realize, because that's where a lot of the things happen. That's how those thoughts or those fantasies that you might have about somebody, that's where Jesus is getting. He says, no. He said the lust isn't just what you say with your physical body, it's what happens in your mind. He says that is what is the problem here. That is what must be removed. That is what must be transformed, because until it is, you have already committed lust. You've already sinned. You may not even said anything. You may not even done. You could have just been standing there, just kind of like minding your own business, and in your mind, you're thinking about this stuff. You've already committed the sin. And so what do we do about that? Well, I think the best thing we can do is to remove any sort of distraction that drives you to it, and to deny our flesh. So the best thing that we can do is, first of all, we can refrain from it by maybe not putting ourselves in situations where these things could happen. So maybe for some guys out there, maybe it's not going to clubs or going to places where they know that there's going to be these prostitutes or these women that are dressed in a certain way, because in this day and age, women have gotten so, beyond, just, I wouldn't say crazy, but they've gotten so smart in ways that they know how to get guys to fall like that. And so that's where us as guys have to say, no, I'm going to deny what my flesh wants and follow what is right. Because not only is this going to better me as a man, but this is going to better the way I view other people. And it's hard. It really is. And I think this applies to both men and women. I don't think this is just a male thing. I think this is a thing of both. So we have to be able to understand that we have to deny our flesh, deny what feels good, because if it's comfortable to you, it's probably not right, because what's comfortable to us isn't comfortable to Christ. So we have to really get rid of that, abstain from it, get rid of it, cut it off, get rid of it. This does not mean you cut off one of your limbs or your eyes. Don't do that. And so this kind of ties in with the second section, divorce. Now, divorce it's actually only 2 verses here, but one of the things that Jesus talks about is, he says in verse 32, he says, "But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her a victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So this kind of connects to it before. So, I know divorces are something that, that most married couples don't want to have to come to, but I know that there are certain cases out there where, it just happens, and it has to happen, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful, maybe if you divorce and you remarry, so just be very careful about that. And you must be willing to say that you officially departed from her, and say you are no longer a part of that. Now, this is a section that I may struggle with a little bit, so feel free to clarify me. But, I hope that this is something that I never have to go through. I hope that no one else has to go through. But just know that, when you commit yourself to someone, that's who you're going to be committed to. You're staying to that person. And so, jumping into the third section, talking about oaths. Now, this is one that's pretty interesting because I think a lot of us don't really recognize the things that we say sometimes. Maybe sometimes a little bit, but you don't really notice it right away. And I think that if I could define this little 3 verses here is, swearing. Everybody knows about swearing. I'm sure we've all done it. If anything, we've said it in our heads a lot. Someone does something, you're like, oh man, you may flip a finger or whatever you may do. And I'm not condemning, but I just want to say, like, this is something that I have dealt with on a personal basis, and I still have some slip ups sometimes. But I think what's interesting is, when we say the term we're going to stop swearing, it doesn't always go so well. It's like saying I'm going to stop committing lust. I'm going to stop, doing that. Like, yeah, it may work for like 1 or 2 days, but then it's just going to come back because that's the motivation that you have. You built up the motivation to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. And 2 days later, you're back. So what do we do about that? Well, Jesus tells us in verse 34 through 37, he says, but I tell you, do not swear on oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All of you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So I want to kind of paint a picture here. So I'm sure we've all been in arguments before, and there's things that come in our heads, and we've all probably been in a situation where voices start raised and things are getting said. So one thing that you'll notice, one thing that I've noticed a lot, things that I've gotten in trouble for and things that I probably shouldn't have done, but one of the things that I noticed is that the more you start, raising your voice and, saying all of these, swear words, it really doesn't better the situation. Most people used to think that, I used to think when I was a kid that, people who said swear words, thought it was a cool thing. But it turns out it's not. It's really not. It really doesn't make you that much better. I mean, it doesn't. And it doesn't sound okay. Maybe it just doesn't make you better. It doesn't grow you closer to God. Like, is swearing going to grow you closer to God? No. But what you have to remember is we have to be aware of our language. So when Jesus says yes or no, I think what he's getting at here is if there's something that's said to you, you apply with yes or no, and then you apply your point, but you don't apply it with anger and violence. We talked about the other day, anger is a natural emotion. Just because you're angry about something does not mean you sinned, but it's how you respond. You can be angry about something, it's okay to be angry about something. If someone took something from you, yeah, you can be mad, but you don't have to, show it through your physical action. You can be mad in your mind. Your response and your actions will depict who you are and how others view you. And when we begin to take a hold of that and say, you know what, I may be mad about this, but I'm not going to let it fall through. You have all these thoughts that happen up here, and a lot of times it just slips right out and you just speak it all out. You say all these things. And what happens is that afterwards you feel just so bad and you feel like just this terrible person and you're beating yourself up about it. We don't need to be doing that. The best thing we can do is reply with yes or no. I know that it's hard. I know that there's situations that you wish you could just let everything out to people and say, this is how I feel, this is how I feel, you're this, you're this, you're this. That's not going to solve it. The best thing you can do is reply with yes or no and then have accurate reasoning towards them. We shouldn't be trying to hold ground, and we shouldn't be willing to say something that has no meaning. We must be willing to hold our ground and respond respectively. Some people aren't going to get that. Some people are going to be really mad at you and they're going to say all sorts of things at you. We don't need to do that back, because when we start saying things like that, that makes us just as bad as they are. And so I think this is very interesting that it ties into this this next section, eye for an eye. This section is a little bit interesting, the way that Jesus explains it. He tells us, verse 39 through 42, he says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If any one of you if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you or take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So this section was kind of tough for me. The biggest thing that I was able to take away from this is that we should not seek revenge against those who hate you. Why? because when we, I think it ties back to what we just talked about. If there's someone that has done something to you, whether they have done something to you physically or said something to you physically that has hurt your feelings, it should not, I know there's natural responses to feel anger, but if we respond with violence and do that, it's really not going to make something much better. And so what do we do about it? We show love and kindness. Why? Because that's what Christ did for us. We do the same things. We used to do the same things to Christ all the time. We think back to where we were before we came to Christ, whether you have been a believer for a long time or you're a new believer. There have been times in our lives where we have denied Christ. Basically, we haven't physically slapped him, but we basically slapped him with the ways we lived our lives and spit in his face. So Jesus is telling, don't be like that. Don't, if someone does these things to you, don't seek revenge. He's like, just sit there and be you. He said, because eventually they're going to realize that what they're doing to you, they're making themselves look like a fool. They look like an idiot. And you are being the responsible and mature person. One of the things that you often notice is, think of bullies, for example. One of the things that, I've been able to identify, and I'm not saying that, I'm a bully or anything, but one of the things that I've always, seen in a lot of situations with, people who were bullied or were the bully is that the reason why that bully was the way they were is because of something that happened usually within their personal life or something that may have happened to them. Maybe they were bullied or something like that, but there's always a root cause there. There's always a reason behind everything. And a lot of times the reason why they are the way they are is because they think if they act a certain way, if they pick on somebody else and do that, they think it's going to make themselves feel better. And this is what's happening here is that, if there's someone who is doing this to you, it's not our job to sit there and retaliate back and say, no, I'm going to fight you back. Like, no, and this is different from self-defense, but if there's someone who is doing something to you, it's not our job to sit there and be like, well, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to slap you back, or I'm going to say all these words back to you, or I'm going to, take all your stuff. Like that doesn't make it better. It doesn't make us any better than them. If we want to become true dedicated lights in the world, like we talked about yesterday, it requires us to be like Jesus. Jesus did not come to say, look at you bad people, look what you did to me, now I'm going to do it back to you. No, he didn't do that. He came to show us love and show us how we should be living. All of these things that we did to Christ, all of these things, people put him on a cross because they didn't like him. They didn't believe him. They thought he was, a hypocrite. They thought he was all of these things. But Jesus never broke. He never gave in because he chose love. He chose to love us. And I think this is really good for this last section, talking about love for enemies. Verse 44 through 45, Jesus tells us, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and good, and he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. I was having a conversation this morning with one of my buddies over some coffee, and one of the things he told me was, he made a depiction. He says, God made all people, and in every single person there's this little spark. There's this little spark, and that can be triggered by love. Now, in some people it's going to be harder than others, but God made all people. He made every single person on this planet. There are 8.5 billion people on this planet. That is insane to believe that, there are people all over the world, and God made every single one of them, and they're all different. And everybody lives their own lives. Everybody lives the way they feel is right. But when we become followers of Christ, it is our job to raise up those who are struggling, or those who can't see, those who are turned in the opposite direction. It's our job to say, hey, grab them, put our hands on their shoulders, and turn them and say, look, this is where we need to be going. This isn't me trying to say, you're a bad person, I'm better than you, you follow me. No, this is saying, there is someone out there who loves all of us. He loved me, and he's going to love you. He's going to love you. Love those who hate you because God loved you. God loved us. God loved us before we even knew him. When we're born, it's not something that's just automatic, like a setting that we are set to love God. No, we are given free will to love God. We choose to love God. The loving of God is not something that is like a flip of a switch where you're just like, oh, it was just a change of a setting, or, oh, it was, I had to stop wearing this, or I had to stop doing this, I had to start eating this. Like, no, it is something that builds up over time. It's not a set thing. We are chosen to live. We are made in his image, and we are allowed to live our own lives. God has allowed us to do that, but to love him, that's something that we have to do. And the only way we can do that is to give up ourselves and love those even though they may say some bad things in our faces and they may do some things to us, and deep down we may wish we could say something back, but it's not going to make you better. It is not going to make you better. It's not going to grow you closer to Christ. And in order for us to be more like Christ, we have to be willing to just say, you know what? I can take it. I can take it. I'm not going to fold. I'm not going to give into it. I'm not going to let my mind and my flesh take over, because those have no meaning. It's all about my spirit, and my spirit is now in the hands of the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, the King of the universe, because he sought me out and loved me, because even though I may have turned him away, even though I may have rejected him, he still loved me, and I'm grateful for that. So that is today's word. I'm going to go ahead and read today's daily prayer. Today is the last day of October 31st. Our title is called Your Beloved. We're in the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 8, which says, Christ proved God's passionate love for us by dying in our place while we were still lost and ungodly. O Lord, you know me. I am grateful that you have seen Christ in Christ and not me. When I consider your ways and the work of your hands, I am humbled. Why are you even mindful to me, considering what you can do and what you can make? Yet I am part of your beloved. I have within me the spirit of him who raised from the dead. I want you to help me walk like it. Straighten my paths, Lord Jesus. Continue to fill me with your spirit. I ask that you would convict me of sin, righteousness, and judgment. Prepare my heart for your return. So Christ came, took our place, took the death that we deserved, so we don't have to live like that anymore. He gave us a second chance. He gave us the opportunity to have a connection with the God of the universe, because that is the ultimate thing we were created for. We were created to love, to serve, and to explore. We weren't made to be evil and dark. God does not want any of us to be like that. He wants to be with all of us. He loves all of us. He's not asking you to go and do all these crazy things. He's asking you to love. God did all of this for us. He came down. He knew that man couldn't save themselves. He came down in a body, took our place. So why would it be fair for any of us to say, no, I'm good? No, this is a lifetime change. We don't want to miss it, because we don't know how many days we have. Every day is a new day. Tomorrow is not guaranteed, so make the best of today. That is today's word. I hope that you guys have had a great week and a great Friday, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.